My relationship with Boastbusters has been long, storied, and, to me, fascinating, so I'm about to detail it extensively in what may be a very long road to actually reaching any kind of point. The first time I saw Boastbusters while marathoning the show, I thought it sucked in general, and had it not been for Twilight's massive feat of conquering the baby star bear, I might have stopped watching the show there and maybe never gotten back to it. At this point, I wasn't being super analytical about MLP yet, but the long and short of why I disliked it is that the characters were being hot-headed and confrontational, and I'm just generally not a fan of that. You may think it's a broad and strange complaint, but it's actually a pretty big deal to me. I've never liked shows wherein the characters just argue all the time, or episodes of shows that center on petty arguments. This is probably because I avoid those kind of arguments in my everyday life. You may have noticed that for the most part my videos are extremely non-confrontational and that I'm always polite and laid back in my comments because I don't want to get into some kind of stupid argument. This is also why I stopped doing the Crepuscular Bronies Discuss podcast. I just simply couldn't deal with Biter's uber-confrontational attitude anymore. In some cases, this aversion of confrontation is actually an obstacle to enjoying something that is otherwise pretty good. For instance, I think Look Before You Sleep is a great episode, but I didn't enjoy it the first time I watched it because AJ and Rarity wouldn't stop arguing. But that's for another video. When I saw the main characters getting into petty squabbles over stupid bullshit, I ended up being annoyed with them and didn't enjoy the episode at all. Adding to that, this episode has a lot of dialogue from Spike at perhaps his most obnoxious ever, constantly repeating his same lines about how Twilight is amazing, and if he wasn't enough, Snips and Snails pose as a foil to him with their love of Trixie, and between the three of them is easily the highest obnoxiousness quotient in the entire show. After completing MLP, I completely forgot about Boastbusters and wouldn't have given a second thought to the great and powerful Trixie if I hadn't launched myself headlong into Bronydom and seen a whole new side of her personality presented by the fandom. Trixie is a character that completely and stubbornly fails. Her most defining moment in the episode is when, after being completely shown up by Twilight, Trixie claims that she's still better than Twi and runs off into the night. It shows her to be exactly as petty and silly as the ponies had thought that she was, and for my money, this makes her a much more interesting character than she would have been if she turned out to be a good guy. Mind you, I still think that her redemption at the end of Magic Duel was a great extension of her character because it showed that Trixie can recognize when a line has been crossed. Yeah, she's still completely full of herself and she doesn't lose that even when she's apologizing, but even she can tell that what happened with the Alicorn amulet was farther than she would have ever taken things. She wants adoration and to think that she's the best, but that doesn't mean she wants to dementedly subject everyone to her whims. But I talked about this already in that video, so let's get back to Boastbusters. The exact moment when I became a Trixie fan was after watching the fan animation Trixie Alone by Tiara Y. It's a story about Trixie's downward spiral and is at once both tragic and hilarious. After this, I fell in love with the pompous showboat, and there's a number of fan works and images of her that I love. When I eventually came back to this episode, I enjoyed it a lot more just because I got to watch Trixie. All of her animations were things that I'd seen used in countless parodies, and I'd heard all of her dialogue used in the song Trixie's Good Side by Pinkie Pie Swear countless times. I could enjoy this while turning my brain off to the rest of the episode. I think this speaks a lot for the dynamic nature of entertainment, and that's why in my original Boastbusters video I clarified right at the beginning that I don't think a review of an episode is ever truly done. Feelings change and evolve and certain things remain ambivalent and unsure. Even if I say in 1 minute that Boastbusters is really awful, I might turn around much later and watch the episode and find that I enjoy it just because I care or there's some affection or nostalgia for it. Back when I started doing episodic analysis in a text-only format, I ripped Boastbusters to shreds. I considered the episode's lesson and its characterization to be totally inept, and I felt that Trixie only started making sense if you read into the subtext of her character. I love the idea that the fans have come up with, that Trixie's magic is stage magic and Twilight's is a more all-encompassing magic, because this setup would tie beautifully into the idea introduced in this very same episode that every unicorn has their own unique kind of magic. The idea that Trixie uses stage magic, though, never comes up, even in Magic Duel, which I still think is a crying shame. In that original post, I did praise all of the unique poses and expressions that Trixie has, which I still think are the saving grace of the episode. I also said that while the Ursa Minor fight is impressive, it doesn't hold up as a great imperative to return to the episode at this point. It's cool and all, but on the level of just being visually or contextually impressive, it pales in comparison to the show's later feats, like the entirety of A Canterlot Wedding. Soon after I wrote that initial post, Magic Duel aired, and I did an analysis of that episode in which I criticized Boastbusters offhand rather harshly. Shortly thereafter, I followed up with a video about Boastbusters which combined the points of my original post with conversations that I'd been having with frequent blog commenter Misfortune Dogged about the episode. As you all probably know, that video is the only one that fell victim to Hasbro's Content ID bullshit, so if you live in the US, you probably haven't seen it yet. Since I'm readdressing a lot of that video's points in this video anyways, there's only one segment from the original that I'm going to restate in full, which is my bit about pacing. In my Magic Duel video, I said that Boastbusters was paced like a hard shit, which it is. However, it was wrong of me to make this sound like a huge detriment, because bad or awkward pacing is something something I often apologize for. The problem with being judgmental about pacing is that in the long run, it usually doesn't matter. Pacing is all about a play of expectation, and when you know what to expect, it has a significantly smaller effect on the manner in which you interact with a work. You might still think of it as being slow or fast-paced, but upon rewatching it isn't as likely to affect your enjoyment. Boastbusters is paced badly, but the real reason I dislike it is the reason for that bad pacing, the fact that there's almost nothing going on in the episode. I put a lot of value on density in all forms of media, and it really shows when you look at a list of my favorite MLP episodes. I love episodes that have a lot to say about the characters, like Lesson Zero, Party of One, Applebuck Season, Luna Eclipse, and A Friend Indeed. I love episodes that have a lot to say about the world and its lore, either visually or expositionally, like Hearthswarming Eve, The Cutie Mark Chronicles, and The Return of Harmony. I also love episodes in which a lot of awesome, hilarious, and fun things happen, like Sweet and Elite, May the Best Pet Win, and the Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000. Boastbusters is significantly lacking in all of these departments, and its narrative concept is paper thin. From there, I went on to talk about why I think this episode misrepresented Applejack's character, because I don't see her as the type of pony who would jump into such a petty conflict at such slight provocation. I still feel this way. I think that Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity were totally in the wrong by getting so offended at Trixie's show and starting a ruckus about it. There's no real evidence to suggest that anyone else in the crowd was offended at Trixie, and these three come across as hecklers whom Trixie then shows up like no pony's business, more or less serving them right. In a context where a character gets served justice for believably being a douche, it can be entertaining to see, but in this case, I just couldn't buy into the idea that this representation was congruent with these characters. And you know what? I can totally understand why others wouldn't feel that way about the situation. This is one of those moments wherein each person's unique perspective can be strongly felt. YouTuber Clover Keen wrote a lengthy rebuttal to my Boastbusters review in which she defends the episode, and her points aren't at all invalid, because they simply come from a different perspective, and that's fine. If you liked this episode and you wanted to seek confirmation for your ideas about it, she's probably the person to go to. Meanwhile, if you really want to get into the bones of what's wrong with this episode, you need look no further than the writings of my friend Misfortune Dogged. When I put out the original Boastbusters video, a lot of people in the comments were defending the episode, and Dogged read those comments and he got pissed, and he wrote an epically dense, close reading of the episode that crushed any desire I had to talk about it anymore. The two of us agreed at the time that we were done with this episode, and then of course my video got blocked, making it the only episode that I absolutely had to talk about again. Dogged did eventually return to the episode in an excellent blog post, which you can find in the description, which is much easier to read than his old one. In it, he summarizes the episode's biggest flaws in 5 bullet points, which I will read off now. 1. We have no narrative clue leading us immediately to criticize Trixie the way the main 6 did. No plot context suggesting anything this negative. Certainly not after a mere 2 sentences easily and commonly understood, rightly or wrongly, as hyperbolic. We're left to extrapolate smugness, but only from 2 facial expressions. The second, vaguer and explicitly noted one made while Applejack is confirming something Rarity has already said. By extension, we don't lucidly understand the main 6's thinking. Scorn cheap pyrotechnics on the fly if you want, but not attitude. 2. Trixie responded to what she reasonably perceived to be heckling. Her responses may or may not have been over the top, but it is believable. 3. Trixie's challenge is odd, because if there was the possibility of her being beaten by her own terms, and logically there's reasonable chance, why would she articulate said terms in a show that has barely begun to a host of people she barely knows? Rainbow Dash, after all, could simply have pointed out that Trixie can't and didn't fly. 4. Twilight's hinted moral conflict is dishonestly morphed into a fear of irritating or harming others, even though the denizens don't care, and her friends have asked her to get involved in showing up Trixie. These elements are obvious, yet the text doesn't make it clear why her hesitation is warranted. And 5. Saving a town from imminent destruction is not the same as sticking up for your friends. Trixie didn't threaten the lives of Twilight's friends, and presumably Twilight never would have hesitated to do what she could to protect lives. So, bringing this overly long and self-indulgent analysis to a close, I rewatched Boastbusters one last time to confirm my thoughts, and at this point I find the episode nigh unwatchable. I'd rather get my Trixie fix from Magic Duel or Equestria Daily, and my pony fix from any other episode of the show. I'm pretty content to finally put this episode to bed and just not think about it anymore. They call me Trixie, the master bitch of all magic spells. You say your name is Twilight Sparkle, that don't ring any bells. I've slayed an Ursa Major, all your feats are just minor. I'll take you back to school, Twi, and show you who's the best rhymer. I got crowds from everywhere, they come to see my magic. My spells are straight electrifying, I'm dropping gods, it's tragic. So check yourself, you impudent fool, I'll make you stagger. By the way, your horn looks kinda limp, go and take some Viagra. And while you're at it, just put the books down, you freaking nerd. You'd have to read to know how to breathe, you're fucking that absurd. I thought the books were better than you. Ed and Bella still got more class, so just take a pass, cause if you keep coming, then Trixie will come beat your ass. Dear Princess Celestia, I learned this today. Some mares like Trixie talk shit. What more can I say? To make it worse, they're cocky, always leaving you sweating, but when they're talking like a bitch, then go and teach them a lesson. You say your spells are great and powerful, I learned from the best. You're just a washed up Vegas reject who failed her magic test. I got a dragon with wits that are sharper than razors. What kind of friends you got, bitch? Some smoke machines and some lasers? Magic is my element, I do not need to be told. Bitch, I was casting stronger magic when I was just a foal. You're a fraud, a bigger chicken than Scootaloo. I was hoof chosen by the princess, now where the fuck does that leave you? Hoof chosen by a troll? You're a pretty dense bloke. She probably just chose you as one of her big fucking jokes. I'll beat you down, twi, make you cry, so best watch what you're starting. I'll leave you so stunned, they'll send you back to magic kindergarten. Now Spike, take a letter, cause the bitch doesn't know the kind of nightmare night she's bringing when she puts on this show. Silly mare, tricks are for kids, you fucking failure, but don't worry girl, though you suck, you still got snips and snails.